Have you ever considered the possibility that something which would typically take 12 months could be achieved in just 30 days? It seems unreal, doesn't it? I used to think so too. Until, one day, I realized that the difference between what is deemed unreachable and what becomes guaranteed lies in your way of thinking. It's not the passage of time that transforms your life, but the clarity you bring to it. And when that clarity shifts, time itself conforms. For several years, I found myself in debt, disoriented, trapped in a pattern of disappointment. I worked extremely hard, yet nothing changed. It was then that a book, Think and Grow Rich, appeared on my path, and with it, an assertion that became my turning point: it is possible to achieve any goal, provided that the guidelines are precisely followed. I didn't immediately buy into the idea. I simply chose to experiment. And in less than 12 months, the bankrupt individual I was began earning more than $100,000 per month. What changed? My inner perception. And that is precisely the topic I wish to discuss with you today. It all started when I realized that what was holding me back wasn't a lack of opportunities, but the way I vibrationally aligned myself with existence. For a long time, I believed that success was a matter of physical exertion, of dedicated hours, of expended effort. However, there was something puzzling. I observed people who worked as hard as I did, or even less, and yet they prospered with remarkable ease. And I also witnessed individuals who were extraordinarily diligent, insightful, full of excellent intentions, but trapped in an endless cycle of bills to pay, debts, and frustrations. It was at this point that a question began to resonate within me: if we all have the same 24 hours a day, why do some multiply their results while others can barely keep afloat? The solution wasn't external. It was internal. The entire cosmos is energy. Every idea, every feeling, every statement you express generates a frequency. It's comparable to a radio station. You only hear the appropriate song by tuning into the exact frequency. Prosperity operates in the same way. I used to live in the frequency of lack, and without realizing it, I transmitted to the world the message of, I don't have, I can't, I'm not capable. And the universe, obligingly, returned precisely that to me, more circumstances that corroborated this belief. The intriguing thing is that I considered myself a realist. I told myself, I'm just confronting the reality of the facts. But I didn't realize that those facts were, in truth, products of my own creation. The reality you experience today is a mirror of the frequency you sustain daily. I recall a day when, sitting in silence, a deeply unsettling realization hit me. I spent more time thinking about what scared me than what I desired. And everything I feared ended up coming true. It was as if my fears possessed more power than my aspirations. And this is true for most people. They wake up thinking about financial obligations, work, responsibilities, adversities. The energy they emanate is one of survival, not innovation. They are incessantly reacting, never consciously choosing. But existence transforms when you stop reacting and start deliberately creating. Have you ever noticed how, during certain periods, everything seems to fall apart simultaneously? The car breaks down, a payment is delayed, someone gets sick, a mishap arises, and suddenly it seems like the entire universe is conspiring against you. But what is truly happening is a vibrational cascade. Each apprehension feeds the next, and you enter a magnetic field of disorder. Now, imagine the opposite, waking up with a feeling of genuine gratitude, even without apparent reasons. The vibration shifts, and with it, everything begins to realign. Traffic flows better, people treat you differently, opportunities emerge out of nowhere. This is not a mere coincidence, it is energetic coherence. On one occasion, during a seminar, a participant stood up and asked me, "Bob, I do everything as expected, but nothing changes. Is the law of attraction not effective for me?" I looked her in the eyes and asked, "When you meditate on what you desire, do you experience contentment or distress?" She replied, "Distress." I smiled and answered, "Then it's not what you aspire to that you are vibrating. It's the fear of not having what you desire." That brought her to tears, as she understood that, with each visualization, she was reinforcing absence, not the presence of what she sought. This is the practice that thousands of individuals inadvertently adopt. They ask for the new while remaining emotionally tied to the old. true metamorphosis begins when you consciously decide which emotion you will feel. It's not about denying reality, but about choosing the energy with which you will confront it. When I started to change my vibrational frequency, nothing seemed to happen immediately. The bills still persisted, the obstacles continued. However, something within me was different. I no longer saw it as a setback, but as a sign of transition. And the more I maintained this new frequency, the more the external environment readjusted. An unexpected client would appear, an unforeseen invitation would surface, an innovative idea would sprout. Everything began to flow naturally. People believe they need to see to believe. But the truth is the inverse: you need to believe to then see. The brain is like an antenna that tunes into possibilities. If you emanate fear, you tune into scarcity. If you emanate conviction, you tune into chances. Contemporary quantum physics, even being an abstract domain, already demonstrates that the observer's perception influences the observed outcome. This is not esotericism, it is science. And it is for this reason that you can never wait for something to change externally before an internal transformation. The outer plane is merely a mirror of the inner plane. I used to tell myself, when I have more money, I will be happier. And the universe retorted, when you are happier, you will have more money. Joy, gratitude, and security are the drivers of creation. They raise your frequency and uncover imperceptible portals. Everything you seek already exists in potential, you just need to align yourself with its vibration. When the mind expands, the cosmos rearranges itself to accommodate it. That is why, when consciousness awakens, what once seemed impossible begins to appear plausible. And it is at this point that many get lost. They long to change their results, but they continue thinking, feeling, and acting in the same way. They want a new chapter, but they refuse to abandon the past narrative. Consciousness is the switch for metamorphosis. It is the moment you decide to stop living by inertia and begin an existence guided by intention. When you understand that nothing changes if you don't change first. And it is at that instant that the entire universe begins to conspire in your favor, because finally you become the energy of what you desire, not of what you fear. This is how the awakening of consciousness converts 1 year of effort into 30 days of extraordinary achievements. Everything that materializes on the physical plane was, at some point, representation in someone's mind. An aircraft, a skyscraper, a piece of music, even the cell phone in your hands, everything originated as an idea. And the same applies to your own results. You can never experience something that you have not previously built in your imagination. I learned this by realizing that my mind operated like a projector. What I visualized internally became the movie I watched externally. The problem is that, for years, the projection I emitted was filled with fear, uncertainty, and deprivation. And the universe, obediently, merely replicated that in my existence. The mind does not process negation. When you state, "I no longer want to be in debt," the image that forms is precisely that of debt. And that is what you nourish. The human intellect operates through images, not words. It was upon assimilating this maxim that everything transformed. I began to project what I aspired to with almost palpable clarity. I saw myself in a spacious residence, with natural light streaming through the windows, perceiving the aroma of freshly brewed coffee in the morning and the serenity of knowing that all my bills were paid. I didn't just think about it, I felt it. This is the distinction between merely dreaming and effectively creating. When emotion merges with the image, the subconscious assimilates that as truth, and the body begins to act in accordance with this new vision. Science corroborates this perspective. Researchers at the Harvard Business Review found that individuals who visualize their goals with emotional fervor are 23% more likely to receive promotions, salary increases, or new opportunities. This occurs because the brain activates the same neural circuits as when you experience the real situation. In other words, when you fantasize about something with great emotional intensity, you are mentally rehearsing success. And the mind, once conditioned, will make every effort to harmonize the physical world with this new reality. However, what most people do is the opposite. They conceptualize their fears with almost surgical precision. They close their eyes and envision overdue bills, failures, rejections, scarcity. And the more emotion they infuse into this, fear, remorse, distress, the more real it becomes in their lives. The mind is fertile and impartial. It doesn't judge, it simply produces according to what you plant in it. And what you experience most often is what you're asking the universe to repeat. I recall the day I decided to put this to the test. I took a piece of paper and firmly wrote, "I am so happy and grateful now that I receive $10,000 every month." I had absolutely no idea how this would come to pass. Yet, morning and night, I recited it aloud, imagining myself already living that reality. I pictured the bank statement, the joy on other people's faces, the freedom to choose. The how was not my concern, that belonged to the universe. My job was to keep the image clear. And, a few weeks later, previously unnoticed opportunities began to emerge. Nothing changed externally, only internally. Most people underestimate the power of a clear mental image. They claim they don't have time to visualize, yet they spend hours on worries, which is exactly the same process, just in a detrimental way. If you can direct energy towards envisioning the worst, you can also use that same power to envision the best. The mind functions like an orchard. It doesn't choose what will grow, it merely reacts to what you plant. And if you water uncertainty every day, you cannot expect to harvest prosperity. On one occasion, a woman approached me, saying she wanted to buy her first home, but everything seemed impossible. She declared, "Bob, when I look at my account, I only see debt." I replied, "Stop looking at your account and start looking at the house." I advised her to visit properties, take photographs, imagine herself opening the door, feeling the floor beneath her feet. She began doing this daily, even without a single penny. In 3 months, she received an unexpected job offer that tripled her income. If you ask me how that happened, I'll say, the cosmos responded to the precision of the image. Because the universe appreciates decisive minds. What makes a visualization effective is not just seeing, but feeling and believing that it's already yours. And the key lies in recurrence. The subconscious mind doesn't change through coercion, but through consistency. The more you reiterate an image filled with emotion, the more it becomes part of your essence. And when you believe yourself to be prosperous, creative, and secure, opportunities begin to recognize you in that way. External reality adapts to the firmness of internal conviction. What you idealize daily is dictating the rhythm of your life. You can persist in projecting scenarios of uneasiness and restriction, or you can begin to project the most extraordinary version of yourself. The universe doesn't decide for you. It merely reflects the representation you hold within your mind. And that's why, when the perspective is clear, the path unfolds. The mind grasps first, the body follows, and the world, inevitably, aligns with the frequency of what you consider possible. Fear is the most paralyzing emotion there is. You don't need to shout to overcome it, a whisper is enough. Sometimes it disguises itself as prudence, as logic, even as duty. But, at its core, it's the same apprehension that prevents millions of people from living the life they desire. I realized this by looking back and seeing how many opportunities one had let slip away simply by doubting myself. The fear of failure is what makes people stay in jobs they hate, in relationships that limit them, and in routines that drain their soul. They say they are waiting for the opportune moment, but the right moment never comes, because fear is a master at fabricating convincing justifications. I distinctly recall the day I was invited to give my first presentation. I had studied, practiced, and yet, a few minutes before stepping onto the stage, my mind began to shout, "What if you freeze? What if you forget everything? What if they mock you?" The apprehension told me it was safer to retreat. But then I grasped something: fear only exists before the action. It lives in anticipation, never in the experience. The moment I took the first step and began to speak, it dissipated. What remained was vitality. Fear converted into strength. It's like that with everything in existence. You don't eliminate fear by thinking, you transform it by acting. The human mind possesses a peculiar mechanism. It prefers the known, even if it's painful, to venturing into the new, even if it's liberating. That's why so many people self-sabotage. They want to prosper, but their subconscious fears transformation. They desire abundance, but they've been trained to see money as difficult, scarce, or even risky. When opportunity arises, They retreat, not because they aren't capable, but because the brain associates success with unexplored territory. And the unexplored, for a mind conditioned by fear, is interpreted as a threat. On a certain occasion, at a seminar, a man asked me, "Bob, I want to change, but what if I fail?" I looked at him and replied, "What if you never try?" The silence that followed was profound. He understood that true failure isn't falling, it's remaining static. When you try, you gain experience. When you don't try, you lose yourself. Fear is a silent thief, and what it steals is not money or time, but potential. It steals what you could have become. Neuroscience clarifies that fear activates the amygdala, a small structure in the brain that regulates our fight or flight responses. When you think of something risky, this region fires as if there were a real danger. But the danger is imaginary. The brain doesn't differentiate between a lion about to attack you and the simple thought of failing in front of others. That's why so many feel terrified of making mistakes. It's a chemical reaction, not a prophecy. The good news is that the same mind that generates fear can be trained to create courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear, it's deciding to act in spite of it. I remember when I left the Toronto Fire Department to start my first cleaning company. I had no qualifications, no experience, and honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. All I had was a book, conviction, and a vision. With every step, apprehension accompanied me. I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking, what if my company fails? What if everything goes wrong? But something inside me said, what if it goes right? It was that question that kept me moving. And it did go right. In a period of less than 12 months, that business earned me more than $100,000. The fear was still present, but I had learned to move forward with it. When you face fear head-on, it shrinks. But when you run from it, it expands. The mind creates monsters the size of your uncertainties. That's why I always say, apprehension is a guiding tool. It points precisely to where you need to go. If something frightens you, it's an indication that there's expansion there. What causes you fear is what will set you free. The only distinction between those who succeed and those who give up is the willingness to overcome discomfort. The pain of trying lasts a short time, the pain of regret endures for an entire lifetime. The fear of failure is the sentinel of your next level. It's there to test if you truly desire what you claim to want. And when you overcome it, you realize that the adversary was never outside, it was always within. It's the internal dialogue that reiterates, you can't, you're not enough, it's not the right time. But the truth is, you'll never be fully ready. You become ready during the process. The universe doesn't wait for you to be prepared, only for you to be willing. Because fear, when understood, transforms into a propellant. And it's this propellant that drives those who dare to achieve in just 1 month what others would take 12 months even to attempt. Fear doesn't vanish, it changes its aspect and converts into a driving force when you decide to act even while trembling. For a considerable portion of my life, I believed that the only way to earn financial resources was by exchanging time for labor. It was common practice in my environment. We woke up early, completed an 8-hour workday or more, received a salary at the end of the monthly cycle, and hoped that, somehow, this would lead us to freedom. But as the years passed, I realized that this model was not only restricted but also doomed to failure. Because time is finite, and when you trade time for money, you are alienating the most valuable asset you possess. It was at this point that I understood the existence of 3 modalities for generating income, and only one of them paves the way for true emancipation. The initial modality is what I designate as M1, the exchange of time for money. This is the archetype under which 96% of the population subsists. These individuals provide services to others, obtain a predetermined amount, and hold the conviction that by intensifying their labor, their earnings will increase. However, this rarely happens. The issue isn't the activity, but the premise. Opulence can never be achieved under this scheme, because time is limited and so is your vitality. You can even double your dedication, but you cannot replicate the amount of hours available in a single day. It's a draining pattern. The more you engage in work, the less time you have for your own existence, and the less time you set aside for living, the greater the feeling of personal emptiness. The second paradigm, denominated M2, consists of employing capital to generate more capital. At this point, the scenario changes drastically. Instead of yielding your time, you mobilize your funds to work on your behalf. Financial investments, assets, real estate, and equity stakes, these illustrate this approach. Unveiling this fundamental truth, I was devoid of any financial resources, yet I understood that the starting point required little more than the right mindset. Wealthy individuals grasp that every dollar functions as a minuscule worker, capable of producing more wealth if invested intelligently. In contrast, those with a scarcity perspective view money as merely an expense, never as an element capable of expansion. Thus, the greater the income, the faster its dissipation. The third structure, named M3, is the true catalyst for existential change, building systems that operate without requiring your direct involvement. It is at this juncture that genuine autonomy manifests. These are ventures, content, concepts, and organizations that continue to generate utility, even in your absence. Upon assimilating this reality, it became clear that monetary independence does not reside in additional effort, but rather in the cultivation of an intellect that works to your benefit. In this way, I transitioned from a firefighter with no future to an entrepreneur with multiple income streams. And such success did not stem from greater cleverness on my part, but because, finally, I began to think like someone who designs their own framework, and not as a mere collaborator within someone else's structure. I recall a teacher I met at one of my lectures. A committed individual, enthusiastic about his profession, yet constrained by an unchanging salary and a crushing amount of debt. He confided in me, "Bob, I love teaching, however, what I receive barely covers my obligations." I inquired, "Have you ever considered sharing your knowledge in a different way?" At first, he didn't grasp the idea. I then suggested he convert his teaching into an online educational program, something he could market while he rested. In a few months, he conceived the course, promoted it on social media, and started sales. 3 months later, he already possessed 5 sources of income and an expanding audience. 1 year later, he resigned from the educational institution and began to subsist solely on his expertise. The identical gift, the same devotion, but, now, supported by a structure. Such is the distinction between linear dedication and leveraged dedication. The great misconception lies in the conviction that amplified effort equates to greater gains. However, this is not the universal dynamic. Energy requires fluidity, not opposition. When solely dedicated to liquidating financial commitments, the psyche enters a state of self-preservation. And a mind in that state does not generate. It merely replicates. For this reason, countless individuals dedicate an entire existence to labor and never build fortune. This occurs because activity without purpose is merely movement, and aimless movement leads nowhere. Genuine abundance arises from learning to amplify the value of your time, instead of relinquishing it. Currently, the global landscape presents opportunities once inconceivable. With a mobile device, a concept, and resilience, it becomes viable to generate revenue on a planetary scale. Everyday individuals are converting hobbies into ventures, skills into platforms, and wisdom into autonomy. It's not magic, it's a pattern of thought. The disparity between those who flourish and those who merely subsist lies in how they perceive time and resources. Those who progress see time as an investment and money as a seed. Those who persist view time as a burden and money as gratification. However, money is not a reward, but rather a result. My lesson over the decades is that emancipation does not come from possessing more financial resources, it emerges from gaining greater control over the origin of those means. By conceiving structures, capital ceases to be an incessant pursuit and transforms into a continuous movement. And it is this flow that grants you options. Options about where to reside, with whom to coexist, and what to conceive. For true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the breadth of life one can enjoy without the anxiety of the next expenditure. Such is the distinction between those who labor for money and those who put money to work for them. And this determination, I can assure you, begins solely with a renewed mental perspective. I will never forget the face of that individual. He occupied the third row during a congress in Chicago. His calloused palms attested to years of strenuous labor. He was a craftsman, father of 2 children, and looked at me with an amalgam of longing and distrust. When I provided the moment for questions, he stood up, wiped his hands on his clothes, and stated, "Bob, I find all of this very beautiful, but it doesn't apply to me. I'm a simple man, with my feet on the ground." And in that second, I grasped the burden that this expression carried. With my feet on the ground. How many use this phrase to legitimize their own inertia? I observed him and declared with serenity, "It is precisely because you conceive of it this way that your existence remains unchanged." He fell silent, somewhat embarrassed, but the seed of the idea had been planted. After the explanation, he came to speak with me. He revealed feeling trapped, exhausted from laboring 12 hours daily, and yet never seeing progress. He had debts, was constantly tired, and incessantly reiterated the maxim, "Financial resources are not for people like me." I saw in that man the personification of millions of human beings across the globe, honest, sincere, diligent, yet captive to imperceptible convictions. Then, I proposed a challenge to him. Over the next 30 days, I want you to record daily, in the morning and before falling asleep, one clear goal. Only one. And I want you to visualize yourself already experiencing that aspiration. No matter how unfeasible it may seem. He demonstrated reluctance, but consented. 3 months later, I received a letter. Inside, there was an image of him, smiling, in front of a modest workshop proudly displaying his name on the front. He narrated, "I never imagined it was feasible. But, as soon as I began to conceive of myself as a capable individual, inspiration started to sprout. A friend lent me a car shelter, another helped me acquire used equipment, and within a few months, I was already repairing cars independently. Today, my income is 10 times higher than before, and the most remarkable thing is that it wasn't the environment that changed. It was me." That sentence impressed me indelibly. For it is precisely this that occurs when thought transforms, the surrounding scenario realigns. This man's metamorphosis did not happen through the assimilation of a new method or the granting of a chance by someone else. It occurred because he modified his perception of himself. Previously, he considered himself a restricted laborer. Subsequently, he began to see himself as a creator. And by altering the way one perceives oneself, one automatically changes what one believes to be achievable. This is the power of self-image. The masses presume they need more money, more time, more luck, but, in essence, they long for a renewed conception of their own identity. The interesting thing is that, like that individual, many tell me, "But I am an objective person, I appreciate the tangible." What they don't grasp is that tangible achievements invariably spring from non-visible origins. The alteration in the way of thinking is imperceptible, but its repercussion is material. It is what transmutes a concept into a corporation, an aspiration into an asset, a longing into concreteness. What that car repairman executed was recalibrating his own tuning. He abandoned the resonance of fear and began to vibrate at the frequency of conception. And the cosmos responds to emitted energy, not to mere aspiration. He didn't plead for prosperity, he personified prosperity. In a brief period of time, I encountered an analogous situation, involving a woman who worked as a hairdresser. She expressed to me, "Bob, my only desire is to coexist in serenity, free from the burden of obligations." I requested that she reproduce the same exercise, to record her aspirations and visualize herself living them. Within 30 days, she began to nurture renewed self-confidence. In 3 months, she started serving clients at her home, and in less than 1 year, she already owned her own establishment. It wasn't by chance, but by harmonization. Her cognition began to operate in a new paradigm of abundance, and the physical universe merely converged. The similarity between these episodes lies in the fact that none of those involved waited for impeccable conditions. They chose to act despite the obstacles. And it is this posture that distinguishes the transformative agent from the mere aspirer. The majority await the perfect conjuncture, the adequate amount, the propitious occasion. However, the cosmos reacts to deliberation, not to indecision. When one proceeds with firmness, even without discerning the methodology, hidden energies mobilize. Individuals appear, opportunities arise, fortuitous events connect. It is what I call the principle of correspondence, the external environment invariably reflects the internal. I have observed this pattern countless times. Disciples, entrepreneurs, heads of families, young people, old people, all started in the identical way, by altering their self-perception. And the most remarkable thing is that, once the individual begins to trust, they emit a distinct vibration. Their countenance changes, their posture shifts, their vocal tone transforms. And the world begins to perceive them in a different way. Those who previously neglected them begin to pay attention. Opportunities that once seemed blocked begin to open. For existence is a reflection, it mirrors not your desires, but your essence. And that was the realization a certain artisan came to. He didn't find success by seeking a shortcut, but by uncovering the power of a resolution fueled by conviction and initiative. He didn't know the path, he simply decided he would walk it. And that choice was enough to shift his vibration. This is what few grasp, the how is never within your purview, but rather belongs to the cosmic realm. Your role is to decide with clarity and act in alignment with that resolution. When you do so, your surrounding environment begins to rearrange itself. People, ideas, circumstances, and even unexpected events start to converge for your advancement. What once seemed unattainable transforms into an inescapable reality. For what truly transforms a person's life isn't sporadic actions, but rather what they conceive as their daily truth. If, by this point, something within you has awakened, if you've experienced that profound emotion, that deep sense that this message is speaking directly to you, then this is your sign. Pause for a moment and reflect. How many times have you heard something that felt tailor-made for your situation, but then let it slip away? How many times have you committed to yourself with an "I'll start tomorrow," only to find, suddenly, that a full 12 months have passed? Indeed, this is precisely what stops most people from changing their lives: paralysis. They absorb the message, feel the inspiration, but remain static. And without action, wisdom simply becomes another dusty book on the shelf of the mind. So, before you go any further, do something simple yet powerful: make a pact with your own evolution. Hit that like button and subscribe right away. It might seem like a mere virtual action, but energetically, it's a declaration. It's the moment you signal to the universe, "I am ready for transformation." It's a vow of purpose. And every metamorphosis begins with a clear intention. Life responds to commitment, not hesitation. When you say yes to your progress, pathways open up that you never even knew existed. I've witnessed hundreds of individuals transform their lives based on a single resolution. It didn't happen when they had all the money in the world, nor when they had abundant free time, but at the moment they declared, "Enough. I am worthy of more." Their vibration shifts instantly. For the universe doesn't understand words, it comprehends frequencies. When you commit to something, you alter your frequency. And that shift, in itself, calls forth new opportunities. The yes you utter today is the genesis of the future you will cultivate. Perhaps you still hesitate, perhaps you're thinking, "Oh, this is just another motivational piece." But no, it's not. Every word that has reached you was designed to awaken something that already resides deep within you, a latent energy, merely awaiting a signal. And if you're hearing this at this very moment, it's because existence has determined that your time has come. You didn't arrive here by accident. Nothing is coincidental when the soul perceives. So, allow yourself to take this step. Subscribe, show your appreciation for this video, and stay with me until the very end, because something far more significant is being built here. With each new publication, you'll realize it's not just motivation, it's a complete recalibration. Every single word is designed to expand your perception and elevate your vibration to the level where desired outcomes begin to manifest and multiply. The mere act of subscribing symbolizes more than just following a platform. It's an energetic choice. It's like declaring, "I choose abundance. I choose expansion. I choose to believe again." And by doing so, you're not merely altering your present, you're transforming your future. Because everything you focus your attention on amplifies. And right now, by directing your focus toward progress, you are nourishing the force that will support the transformations you yearn to experience. Remember, the universe responds to clarity. If you appreciate this content, hit that like button right now, and as you do, close your eyes for a brief moment and mentally declare, "I choose to expand." Feel the power of those words resonating within you. This is how transformation begins, not with grand gestures, but with modest choices underpinned by the right intention. You don't need to have all the answers, you just need to decide that you will no longer settle for anything less than what you are truly destined for. And that simple agreement can be the turning point of your journey. So, mark this moment. It has the potential to be the first of many days in your renewed existence. In school, I was never taught to think. I was taught to reproduce, to memorize, to comply. From an early age, we were conditioned to follow rules, await instructions, and fear making mistakes. It's paradoxical because education should liberate us, but what it often does is confine us to an invisible mold. The educational system trains you in punctuality, in behavior, in conformity, yet it never teaches you to conceive, to create. It never shows you how to transform a concept into liberation, a skill into prosperity, a vision into reality. And that's why most people spend their entire lives studying to work for someone else's dream, someone who actually learned to think for themselves. I know individuals with 3 academic degrees who still worry about paying their bills at the end of every month. They dedicated themselves enough to become model employees, yet they were never taught how to build something that would truly free them. It's not their fault. It's the system. A framework that emerged during the Industrial Revolution, time when the world needed compliant factory workers, not innovative thinkers. The paradigm hasn't changed, but global reality has transformed completely. Today, what holds value is no longer the breadth of your knowledge, but your ability to conceive, innovate, and adapt. And what's most alarming is that the fear of making mistakes still drives most of the population. Since early childhood, we were penalized for trying anything different from the conventional. When we made errors, we were corrected. When we dared to think differently, we were silenced. Yet, the truth is that every significant breakthrough has emerged from error, from questioning, and from the courage to confront what seemed unattainable. Think about how many ideas were dismissed before they changed the planet. Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. Walt Disney was labeled lacking imagination. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. All of them shared one common trait: they learned to think outside the box, to place more faith in their inner intuition than in external validation. And I ask, how many lives are currently trapped in jobs that don't fulfill them, simply because they were taught to believe that path was the right one? How many survive in fear of venturing out, because they believe permanence equates to protection? The paradox is that the real danger lies in the absence of change. It's in staying in the same place, repeating the same actions, waiting for life to change on its own. What academia never taught you is that the world is led by those who dare to create. By those who understand that cognition, the act of knowing and perceiving, is the essential element of every accomplishment. I've witnessed this firsthand. I recall a sharp individual who joined one of my projects. He had an impeccable management background and stellar evaluations, but he was experiencing frustration, afraid to aim too high. He followed the path the system laid out. He studied hard, earned his degree, landed a good job. Yet, he still felt empty, as if something deep within him knew that wasn't where he belonged. He told me, "I've done everything right, but nothing feels right." And I replied, "Nothing feels right because you're living in someone else's design conceived before you. It's time to create your own." He began studying cosmic laws, coming to understand that consciousness is the true realm of creation. He started dedicating 1 hour daily to learning about finances, vitality, and purpose. In less than 6 months, he established an online business that spread across the entire nation. The same individual who was earning less than $1,000 monthly started to profit 10 times that amount, doing something he loved. He didn't need another certification, just a refreshed perspective on thinking. And this is what few discern: it's not specialized expertise that transforms your life, it's introspection. It's unlocking the ability to guide your intellect, to believe in your vision, to see possibilities where others only perceive obstacles. Academia teaches you to solve problems. Life rewards you when you learn to create solutions. The distinction might seem subtle, but it's colossal. To solve is to react. To create is to command. You don't need more training, you need greater perception. You don't need more time dedicated to studying, you need greater clarity about the object of your learning and your motivation. Because data devoid of purpose is just noise, and goals without execution are merely deferred desires. True education emerges when you choose to internalize what the concrete situation demands: emotional intelligence, a growth mindset, and the ability to convert concepts into practical value. And do you know what's even more liberating? When you realize you can absorb all this knowledge autonomously. Today, wisdom is everywhere, in your hands, on your mobile device, in publications, in audiovisual media, in training courses. What isn't scarce is access. What's lacking is focus. While many individuals spend long periods scrolling through a screen, others use that same amount of time to build a new life. And in just a few months, the outcomes begin to reverse. For this reason, I always say, genuine power resides in the ability to unlearn. To release everything you've been taught about what's achievable, and to start questioning every single precept that kept you small. Every time you allow yourself to think independently, the universe responds with unprecedented possibilities. When you let go of the fear of failure, failure transforms into a teacher. When you break free from the apprehension of breaking with convention, convention loses its hold over you. Perhaps no one has told you this before, but your presence isn't meant for conformity. You are here to expand. And expansion brings discomfort, because it means abandoning the comfort zone of routine and venturing into the unexplored. However, that is precisely where the extraordinary manifests. It's when you stop being merely a repeater and become the innovator who inspires. The day you start thinking for yourself will be the moment the world begins to follow you. I distinctly recall a seminar I conducted in Chicago. The venue was packed, with individuals of all ages and backgrounds, but one man in particular caught my eye. He was sitting in the back rows, his work overalls still stained with grease. He was a mechanic. His gaze blended exhaustion and disbelief, like someone who had already explored every alternative and still felt trapped in an unchanging cycle. At the end of the conference, he approached me and said, "Bob, everything you say is motivating, but it doesn't apply to my life. I'm just an ordinary guy." I looked him in the eyes and replied, "That's precisely why your life isn't progressing. You've convinced yourself that you're ordinary. And the universe can only grant you what you believe yourself to be." He gave a self-conscious smile, but I could tell those words had struck a chord deep within him. So, I challenged him, for 30 days, every single day, before you go to sleep and when you wake up, write down on a piece of paper what you truly desire for your life. Not what you think you can get, but what your heart genuinely longs for. And read it aloud. Then, start acting as if you already are that person. He hesitated but agreed. Initially, as he later told me, he felt ridiculous. He thought it was just some self-help exercise. But what he didn't realize was that each time he wrote and verbalized those words, he was beginning to reprogram his own mind. People underestimate the power of consistency. They deem it foolish, but that's precisely how the mind assimilates, through emotional repetition. Gradually, that auto mechanic started behaving differently at work. He no longer spoke like a defeated man. He began treating every customer as if they were an investor, every service as if it were part of something grand. In 3 months, he had saved enough to rent a small garage and open his own workshop. And in less than 1 year, his income multiplied by 10. But the true transformation wasn't in the financial metrics, it was in his perception. He stopped viewing the world as a place of scarcity and began to identify opportunities everywhere. The same man who once believed he was too realistic to dream, began encouraging other mechanics to establish their own businesses. And it was then that I understood something profound. The belief that most restricts individuals isn't the fear of failure, it's the apprehension of being too great. How many times have you thought that certain ideals weren't for you? How many times have you observed someone successful and thought, "Oh, he got lucky," or "he has something I don't"? The truth is, no one is exceptional by nature. What distinguishes the victorious is the decision to stop living the narrative they inherited and start writing their own. The Chicago mechanic didn't wait for the universe to hand him a new life, he became a new individual, and the universe simply reacted to his new frequency. When you change how you see yourself, everything changes. Different people begin to cross your path, ideas that once seemed trivial start to make sense, and hidden opportunities begin to emerge. Not because the world transformed, but because your mind started to perceive what it previously ignored. This is the law of perception. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And to become what you desire, you must first allow the old version of yourself to perish, the one that doubts, that hesitates, that thinks it wasn't born for this. I've witnessed this happen hundreds of times. Ordinary people, without resources, without contacts, but with an unwavering determination to change. They start small, like that mechanic, but something within them ignites. In a few weeks, the sparkle in their eyes changes, their voice shifts, their behavior transforms. And when behavior changes, the outcome changes. It all begins when you decide to stop saying, "This isn't for me," and start affirming, "This is exactly for me, and I'm going to figure out how to get there." Perhaps the Chicago mechanic never imagined he would own his own business, but he discovered something few understand: power doesn't reside in fortune, it lies in the daily choice to believe. He wrote to me some time later saying, "Bob, the most impressive thing is that I didn't need capital to start, I just needed to stop thinking like an impoverished man." That phrase stuck with me because it's the purest truth. Wealth isn't something you acquire, it's something you become. And that's how it all begins, with a renewed identity. When you start to see yourself as capable, deserving, and worthy, the universe rearranges all the pieces around you to confirm that perspective. The Chicago mechanic stopped being just a dedicated worker and transformed into a value creator. He didn't wait for impeccable conditions, he simply took the first step. And when you start, the universe completes what you initiate. The question that remains is, how many opportunities have you let slip away because you believed it wasn't the right time, that you didn't have enough, or that you weren't good enough? Perhaps what's separating you from your next level isn't a lack of time or means, but a limiting belief about who you truly are. That man taught me as much as I taught him. He showed me that the capacity for transformation is accessible to anyone, anywhere, as long as they are willing to think differently. Because when you change what you believe, the unattainable becomes merely a matter of time. Grab a piece of paper right now and write down a simple sentence: "I am so happy and grateful right now because I receive $10,000 per month." It seems like a trivial exercise, doesn't it? But what unfolds from that act is something few truly grasp. When you write, you're not just transcribing words onto paper, you're communicating a new reality to your subconscious. You're issuing a direct command to the part of your mind that controls your behaviors, decisions, and perceptions. And if you do this for 30 consecutive days, something begins to shift inside you. The human mind doesn't distinguish between what is factual and what is vividly imagined with emotional fervor. That's why you can watch a film and shed tears, even knowing that none of it is actually happening. The brain reacts to emotion, not rationality. And this is the secret that the great achievers of the planet have always understood, even without knowing the technical term for it. Science calls it experimental neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to reorganize itself based on the experiences we repeat. In other words, if you vividly experience a situation in your mind, with feeling and regularity, your brain begins to consider it as real. Now, reflect with me: if your brain believes you are already a prosperous, confident, and abundant person, how do you think it will start to act? Exactly, it will guide you to choices that confirm that conviction. It will filter new opportunities, it will notice paths that previously went unnoticed. Because your perceptual system, what psychology calls the reticular activating system, begins to recognize what is in harmony with the mental image you cultivate. Therefore, when you write, "I am grateful now because I earn $10,000 per month," it's not a falsehood. It's a seed. It's a new code being inserted into your mind. And every seed requires consistency, not force. You don't need to believe it entirely on the first day. You only need to be willing to reiterate it until the previous belief begins to dissipate. Gradually, your emotional vibration changes. And the universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your vibration. Most people live by reacting to their present situation, thereby reinforcing what they don't desire. They declare, "I'm broke, nothing works for me, I'm not good with money." And each time they express this, they strengthen the very pattern they wish to break. But when you start to consciously program yourself with new affirmations, your subconscious begins to work in your favor, not against you. It's like rewriting the source code of your very existence. I recall an individual who once approached me, claiming he had been trying to change his life for years, but nothing ever worked out. He alleged he had bad luck, that opportunities simply didn't present themselves. I proposed this very exercise to him. At first, he found it absurd, as if he were deluding himself. But after a few days, he began to experience a different sensation. He declared that each time he wrote, he felt relief, as if a new dimension was revealing itself within him. And it was within that space that ideas began to sprout. In 3 weeks, an epiphany for a new venture struck him. In 2 months, he was already putting it into practice. And when he noticed, he was earning more than he had thought possible. The change didn't come from the writing, but from the frequency he began to radiate. By altering your vibration, you alter the course of outcomes. For the universe acts as a reflection, it doesn't grant what you desire, but mirrors your essence. And existing is a matter of conviction, not of condition. There are people who constantly utter positive affirmations, but see no results. And for what reason? Because they speak the words without feeling them emotionally. They declare, "I am wealthy," but their physical body pulses with lack, their spirit trembles with fear, their intellect wavers in uncertainty. It's like trying to tune a radio whose selector is on another band. The speech is emitted, but the audio doesn't become clear. That's why, when performing this practice, pause, breathe, and perceive. Envision what it would be like to experience that existence now. Contemplate the home, the well-being, the autonomy. Experience the serenity of honoring financial commitments without burden, of being able to help others without fear, of having mastery over your economic landscape. Emotion is the driving force of manifestation. Each time you feel abundance as if it were real, you are boosting the same brain connections that would be activated if you were truly living that. And over time, your mind begins to align your attitudes and interpretations with this new identity. This is how habits change, how behaviors transform, and how new opportunities begin to align spontaneously. Do this for 30 days. 30 mornings and 30 nights. Don't omit a single day. Because it's not about the sentence itself, but the vibration it awakens within you. And if you allow yourself, you will notice something powerful. Opposition will vanish, replaced by a quiet conviction. A tranquil certainty, as if you had finally re-established the link with your true essence. You don't need to impose the outcome. You only need to become the individual that success seeks. And that is the true secret. It's not about doing more, but about being more. When you write every day, you are announcing to the cosmos, "I choose a renewed identity. I decide to resonate differently." And the universe, naturally coherent, reacts exclusively to that condition. Because it always assents to what you have faith in. So, try it. Not as a pastime, but as a pact with your renewed self. In 30 days, you won't just see a difference in the results, you'll see a difference in yourself. And when that happens, you'll understand that no external element outside of you needed to be altered. All the potential always resided within your intellect, waiting for you to pen the first verse of a new saga. There was an individual who never left my memory. He worked as a bus driver and earned a little over $400 per month. Every day, he took the identical route, observed the same streets, the same people, and carried the analogous feeling that life was slipping away before his eyes without truly materializing. When he sought me out, he showed exhaustion, not physically, but spiritually. He affirmed that he no longer had faith in transformations, that his fate was to drive the bus until retirement. I looked at him and saw a mirror of my own past self, a man captive to a routine, convinced that the world is what manifests externally, and not what is built internally. I suggested a simple task to him, to write daily, for 30 days, the sentence, "I feel extremely happy and grateful at present. For I obtain $10,000 per month." He immediately scoffed. He considered it preposterous. He declared that it was nothing more than a personal illusion, that words don't alter the truth. And I simply responded, "You've tried believing in failure for many years, and see where that has led you. How about trying to believe in your own capability for 1 month?" He acquiesced, albeit with distrust, but accepted. In the first few days, he told me that he fulfilled the task as a duty. He wrote quickly, without pondering, just to complete the assignment. But something peculiar happened. Around the 10th day, he began to perceive a distinct sensation. He mentioned that, while writing, an inner voice began to inquire, what if it were feasible? What if life could truly be different? This tiny spark of viability was the prelude to the metamorphosis. His intellect began to make room for a new perception of himself. And with each reiteration, the visualization became clearer. On the 20th day, he began to consciously envision a particular venture. A high-end transportation service, something that could provide greater convenience and an exclusive service. He had never considered such an idea previously, but now the concept seemed to solidify in his mind. He began to record plans, outlined itineraries, conceived a name. On the 30th day, he had written not only the sentence, but a complete business plan. There was no money, there were no means, but there was clarity. And clarity is the initial stage for realizing any goal. In the 6 months that followed, he not only accumulated enough to acquire a superior vehicle, but also gained 2 partners who believed in the concept. In a short time, he left his job and founded his own high-end transportation company. When I saw him again, he told me that he now woke before sunrise, not by imposition, but by fervor. He said he finally understood the meaning of working with intention. The same man who once perceived the bus as captivity now saw his role as a badge of autonomy. What changed? It wasn't the external circumstances. It was his perception. It was the mental representation he chose to cultivate until its materialization. He stopped thinking like a subordinate and began to conceive like a creator. The universe did not oppose the new resonance and rearranged itself to the parameter of his new essence. This is the genuine magic, and it manifests within the depths of the mind. Many people hear this story and ponder, oh, but he had good fortune. Destiny? No. Luck is the designation individuals attribute to what is unintelligible to them. What he did was synchronize mental power with the desired outcome. And when that happens, what we call coincidences begins to intensify. Individuals appear, concepts sprout, paths open. But none of this is by chance. It is resonant alignment. By altering the way you perceive yourself, the world reacts differently. The bus driver didn't just change professions, he transformed his essence. He abandoned the condition of a surviving individual to become a creative man. And that is precisely what most people forget. Success is not a location, it is an alignment. You don't reach it by traveling, you achieve it by attuning. This man taught me that power doesn't reside in possessing, but in being. Because when one truly is, possession is merely a consequence. He could have persisted in the same narrative indefinitely, an existence of restrictions, of sameness, and of resignation. But he chose to wield a pen and rewrite his own fate. What began as a simple practice transformed into a new reality. And perhaps you are stuck on the same path, circulating in repetition, convinced that the course remains unaltered. But the route changes when the driver changes. When the thinking changes. When conviction transmutes. Everything begins with a simple act of trust, not belief devoid of reason, but faith in yourself, in the ability to build something superior to what is experienced in the present. The driver declared something to me that I never forgot. Bob, I imagined that driving was my captivity. Currently, I understand that it was my training. I just needed to alter the route. And that is precisely it. Existence doesn't place you in circumstances by mere chance. Everything constitutes preparation for what you are becoming. The problem is that the vast majority give up in the course of the journey, judging that the present conjuncture is the epilogue of the narrative. But it's not. It is merely one section, and you are the writer. When he told me this, I realized that the secret of metamorphosis didn't reside in capital, nor in labor, nor in conditions. It was in the moment he chose to think differently. Because thinking is the genesis of everything. He didn't found a corporation out of a desire to get rich. He established it because he finally believed in his capability. And that conviction is the trigger that alters the entire panorama. Ultimately, he understood something that every human being needs to understand: the external universe is merely the mirror of the internal universe. No external occurrence manifests before an internal alteration. When inner transformation takes hold, what was once unthinkable becomes an undeniable reality. The person who once led others began to live out their aspirations, starting with their own. So, don't keep this wisdom just for yourself. Share this message with someone important, someone who might desperately need to hear these exact words today. It could be a friend, a family member, someone feeling utterly defeated, convinced there's no way out. Sometimes, a simple communication like this is all it takes to rekindle hope and unlock a life of true fulfillment. My genuine appreciation for your continued partnership. Every moment you dedicate to your personal growth shapes your future. Join me on this adventure, as in our next content, we'll further elevate your understanding and build the life you truly aspire to live. I eagerly await your participation.